Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. Today we're exploring a topic that honestly completely changes how we look at ancient texts and modern science. We usually think of spirituality and physics as two entirely separate worlds, right? One deals with the mystical, the other with the mathematical. But what if they're actually describing the exact same reality, just using a different vocabulary? We're going to see exactly how the ancient wisdom of the Bhagavad Gita, specifically chapter 5, uses the exact principles of thermodynamics to explain the eternal nature of the human soul, and, more importantly, how we can use that knowledge to manage our daily energy.
Now, you might be wondering, what if ancient spirituality was actually just early physics? It sounds wild, I know, but it turns out there's a really profound connection between the hard laws governing our physical universe and the ancient wisdom meant to govern our minds. When we look at texts that are thousands of years old, we tend to assume they're just poetry or simple metaphors. But researchers are finding striking, literal parallels between the fundamental laws of energy and the ancient concepts of the soul and human consciousness. It's an absolute paradigm shift.
We're starting our journey right in the middle of the battlefield of Kurukshetra. This is the setting of the Bhagavad Gita, where Prince Arjuna is facing a massive moral and emotional crisis. He's overwhelmed, he's stressed, and basically, he's having a total mental breakdown. Essentially, he's experiencing a massive spike in psychological entropy right before a huge war. He turns to his charioteer, Lord Krishna, for guidance, and the epic dialogue that follows about the nature of existence reveals some astonishing parallels with modern thermodynamics. Krishna isn't just giving Arjuna a pep talk here, he's giving him a literal masterclass on energy dynamics. Let's look at the first law of thermodynamics. You probably remember this one. Energy cannot be created or destroyed, it only transforms from one state to another. Now compare that directly to chapter 2, verse 20 of the Gita, which says the soul is unborn, eternal, permanent, and not destroyed when the body is destroyed. They are describing the exact same concept. The soul isn't some abstract ghost. The Gita views it as a literal, indestructible energy field. It doesn't die, it simply transitions. Your core essence is eternal energy. The text uses this brilliantly relatable metaphor. It says, just as a person discards an old and torn shirt and wears a new one, the soul also discards an old body and acquires a new one. In thermodynamic terms, think of the soul acting like energy in a closed system. It's perpetually recycled. Just as thermal energy might transition into kinetic energy, the soul transitions into new phases or new bodies rather than simply ceasing to exist. The energy is never lost. The cosmic equation always balances out perfectly.
All right, let's move into section 1, mental entropy and chaos.
So, if our soul is this perfect eternal energy, why do we feel so incredibly exhausted and burned out all the time? Well, the answer lies in the second law of thermodynamics, entropy. In physics, entropy is a system's natural progression toward disorder and chaos. Energy transfers lead to waste. In human terms, it's that awful burnt-out feeling you get after agonizing over a single work email for 3 hours. The sources tell us that constantly engaging in sensory pleasures and chasing desires consumes our energy resources without generating any useful work. It dissipates our internal energy, leading straight to a high-entropy, chaotic state of mind. Check out how ancient texts categorize the universe's material energy. It maps out remarkably closely to modern physics. Earth is potential energy, water is kinetic, fire is thermal. But the real mind-blower here is how they viewed our cognitive processes. The mind, the intellect, and the ego are linked directly to entropy. Our cognitive processes naturally strive for order, but when they get driven by ego and unchecked desires, they generate chaos, complexity, and mental drift. Your ego is literally an entropy-generating machine, constantly radiating your precious internal energy out into the void as totally useless heat. Which brings us to section 2, chapter 5, the formula. So how exactly do we fix this mental entropy? If your soul's core energy is eternal, how do we protect it from the friction of daily life? Chapter 5 introduces karma sannyasa yoga. Instead of viewing this as some strict religious dogma, I want you to think of it as a highly practical formula for energy efficiency. It's literally the instruction manual for your soul's energy. It teaches you how to act in the world, doing your job, raising your family, paying your bills, but without burning yourself out over the outcomes. In this chapter, Arjuna is actually pretty confused. He asks Krishna, which path is better? Do I physically renounce the world and hide in a cave, or do I take action in the world? The text compares these two paths, sannyasa and karma yoga. And Krishna insists that karma yoga, selfless action, is actually superior for most of us. Why? Because you can't escape the universe's energy dynamics just by hiding in a cave. True renunciation is internal. It's about fully engaging in your earthly duties, but completely detaching your ego from the success or failure of the result. In the language of physics, a karma yogi is basically a perfectly optimized low-entropy system. A true karma yogi has a pure mind, they're unattached to personal gain, and they stay completely peaceful whether they succeed or fail. They're incredibly productive. They are absolutely doing the necessary work, but they lose zero energy to the friction of stress, anxiety, or that exhausting need for external validation. All of their energy is beautifully conserved. I absolutely love this ancient metaphor used here. Though acting, he is untouched, like a lotus leaf in water. It perfectly describes a closed thermodynamic system. The lotus leaf sits right in the middle of the murky water, completely interacting with its environment, but the water just beads right off. It remains totally untouched by the surrounding external chaos. And that is exactly the ultimate goal for our own eternal mental energy.
Let's dive right into Section 3, Action Without Energy Loss.
Okay, researchers have actually created a modern thermodynamic well-being model based on these exact Chapter 5 concepts. It starts with this energy transformation function. Think of T sub m as your battery life at the end of the day, your transformed state of clarity and calm. T sub o is your initial mental energy. S sub m represents your mental entropy, all that exhausting chaos. And the alpha symbol, that represents the positive practices you put into place, like mindfulness and detached action. By increasing those positive practices, you lower your overall mental entropy, completely protecting your battery life. It is literal math applied to your soul's well-being. And the model goes even further than that. To find your equilibrium constant, which is basically a metric of how balanced you are, you divide the energy you conserve by the energy you bleed out. When you practice detachment and acceptance, just like Chapter 5 teaches, you save energy. When you obsess over your desires, your ego, and negative thinking, you waste energy. You obviously want that conserved number to be much, much higher. The less energy you bleed out worrying about things you can't control, the more eternal energy you have left to actually live a vibrant life.
The really cool part is you can actually track your own mental entropy day to day. By logging things like your mental clarity and focus and pinpointing exactly why you're losing energy, maybe let your ego hijack a meeting or you were overthinking a project's results, you transform the totally abstract concept of karma into measurable data. Implementing conservation practices like deep breathing or detached action directly stabilizes your internal energy flow. It just goes to show that this ancient wisdom completely holds up to modern scrutiny.
And that brings us to Section 4, Achieving Thermal Spiritual Equilibrium. When you manage to balance these internal forces using that Chapter 5 formula, the result is ultimate stability of mind. Just as a physical system eventually settles at a uniform temperature when it's left alone, the human mind, when managed through selfless action, reaches this incredibly beautiful state of thermal and spiritual equilibrium. When you aren't constantly heating up with anger or freezing with fear over the outcomes of your life, you achieve a steady, sustainable, and entirely peaceful internal climate. The source material wraps up Chapter 5 with this really profound realization. It states that true peace is found when you recognize a higher universal order. Whether you view that as God, the universe, or just the fundamental laws of physics, surrendering your personal ego to the greater cosmic system is the ultimate path to true peace. You aren't generating the energy. You're just an eternal vessel for it. Once you truly accept that, your internal friction vanishes and your entropy drops to zero. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a final thought about conserving your own spiritual energy. The physics say your core energy can never be destroyed, and the ancient wisdom says your soul is eternal. So really, the only thing that matters is how you manage the flow of that energy right now. If your energy is eternal, how will you choose to transform it today? Will you lose it to the chaos of the ego, or will you act with the graceful detachment of a karma yogi?